Alright, so I already made a video talking about this whole hoopla around the 5150 Iconic, but I didn't leave it up for very long because the more I thought about it, the more it was kind of. It wasn't really like a level headed, it was more of like a annoyed rant, and it's not really what I want to be about. So this is a more even keel, level headed look at the situation, and I'm just going to jump right into it. So first and foremost, a lot of people are upset that it's not like the metal amp of the year that they thought it would be. And I think that's an unfair judgment to place on the amp because it the 5150 was never supposed to be a metal amp. It was an Eddie Van Halen signature amp that just so happened to sound really good for heavy metal. So to expect something that is in the same family of amps to be this like modern metal gold standard for guitar tones, I think that was probably people building up their own expectations, and it just didn't work out the way they thought it would. I've watched plenty of demos and videos on it, probably more than I should, because this has been like everywhere. I can't, in 25 years of playing guitar, I can't remember this much discourse around a piece of gear. Maybe the Mesa Boogie Badlander, but not like this. But you know, it sounds all right for that 80s style Van Halen sound. I can see why people are kind of disappointed that it's not. It doesn't have like it doesn't sound like Burn My Eyes or a Chimera type of guitar tone, which honestly, yes, that's what I associate with the 5150. But I mean, one, nobody's really trying to go for that. The people that are demoing this amp on YouTube are not trying to go for that sound to begin with. We're in a whole different era of heavy metal guitar for the most part as to what you see on YouTube. It seems to me the guys that don't think that there's a problem with the low end, which it does seem like there's a problem with the low end, but the guys that don't seem to be making a big deal out of that are also guys that tune to like drop F or something ridiculous like that. So I mean, they're dialing out a good bit of low end from their tone in the first place. Some of the other guys that have demoed them, they're guys that, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm not fans of their tones in general. I'm not naming names because it's not that kind of video. And tone, let's be honest, is subjective. I mean, obviously, you know, there's certain tones that people agree on as being really good and some being really bad. But I mean, for the most part, I'm not going to knock somebody for their guitar tone just because I don't like it. It's just not for me. So I mean, nothing's really blown me away as far as the 5150 Iconic goes. But I also think on the flip side of the coin, people are being overtly critical to the point where it's almost dismissive. Now, I know there's people out there that really honestly believe they can tell the difference between a solid state amp and an amp that's made in China and an amp that's made in America. And really the only reason you know the difference is because you know beforehand that it's a hybrid amp or that it's made in China. I guarantee in most circumstances, if people didn't know what amps were being put up against each other, they're not going to know what country they're in. The average music fan, the average person in the crowd, they're not going to know the difference between a hybrid amp, an Axe FX, a tube amp, whether it was made in the United States, whether it was made in China. They don't know. They don't care. As long as it sounds good to them. I do think it's kind of funny that people are complaining that the amp sounds fizzy as they fire up their Mesa Boogie dual rectifier, but whatever, man. Again, that kind of falls under the subjective thing. But I guess where the problem lies now is we've reached a point where instead of just having opinions, people are going out of their way to vehemently defend or shit on this amp, or like they're being antagonistic with their titles of their videos and things like that. Like they're basically inviting people from the opposite end of the opinion to come in and give them shit for it. And you know, I know how YouTube works. That's part of the game. But I mean, when you blatantly title your videos a certain way, you gotta expect that people are gonna come in and give their strong opinions that don't necessarily jive with yours. So to me, once you do that, you lose the ability to be like, look at all these people. Well, you poked the bear, you know, you kicked the hornet's nest, and you know, with your title for your videos. So I mean, you kind of had to expect that. Now it does seem to me that some of the videos in favor of the amp are they're being very creative with their word choicing. It seems like they're focusing on the features of the amp rather than the tones you can get from the amp. Like they know it might not necessarily sound good, so they're like, well, look what you get in the box. And you know, for what it's worth, I guess, yeah, you get a lot of features, but you know, the same thing could be said about a Line 6 Spider. You got a lot of features, doesn't mean it sounds good. And there's a little bit of circle jerking in the comments between well-known YouTubers in the guitar community that's starting to kind of, rather than be like honest appraisals of the amp, it's starting to kind of give the impression of like smugness, like we like it and you don't know what you're talking about if you don't like it. But it's also, I kind of wonder some of it, like some of the guys that I know this is treading on dangerous waters, but it almost kind of seems like, and this is just a perspective thing, this isn't an accusatory thing, but from a certain perspective, it looks like the guys that got the amps sent to them, it almost feels like they're afraid of breaking that connection to the company and not being able to get stuff in the future. Or the guys that bought the amps, it's almost like a post-purchase rationalization, like they have to justify that the money they spent was worth it to other people. And really, ultimately, if you like the amp, it should only matter to you. Like, you don't have to prove to anybody else that it's a good product. Like, if you like the amp, then that's fine. If you don't like the amp, that's fine. But in the internet world that we are in, you can't just like or dislike something. You have to get on your soapbox and tell everybody why they're wrong if they don't agree with you. Now, I do think it's funny that the extreme lengths that some people are going to talk about how great this amp is kind of, it's just nuts. But on the opposite side of that coin, the people that are going through extreme lengths to talk shit on the amp are kind of beating a dead horse. Like, yeah, I get it, it's fizzy, it sounds like 80s guitar tones, it's not a modern metal amp, all this other shit. The price point, you know, you could argue the price point, but I mean, having a name like Eddie Van Halen attached to it, regardless of whether the artist is alive or dead, generally commands a premium. You know, it's why signature guitars generally cost more than guitars within the same spec range or line. You know, I mean, that's why a Jim Root Jazzmaster costs $1,700 or whatever it is for a Mexican-made model, and most of the Mexican models top out at like $1,100-$1,200. You know, there's a reason for that. It's the same thing with the LTDs. LTD guitars that are signature guitars usually cost, I think now, with the last price increase, they're around like $1,450, $1,500. And your EC1000, or EC1000, your 1000 series LTDs cost around like $1,000, $1,100. You know, there's always going to be that premium attached because of the name. And yes, there was a $100 price increase before most people could even try these amps, but that also, within the last year, is nothing new, especially with Fender brand products. Fender has raised prices at least 3 times since March of last year. I made a video talking about the Jackson King V that I wanted to get, the white one, it's kind of like the throwback to the one that Hetfield used for Master of Puppets. And when it was originally announced, it was $9.99, and you could not find it anywhere. And all of a sudden, it was $10.99. So that's just the unfortunate side effect of the world that we're living in right now. The amp isn't for me, but I would say that there is fair criticism and there is fair praise for the amp. It's just not for everybody. Unfortunately, any level-headed constructive discussions about the amp are getting lost in the uproar that is currently going on as people butt heads over whether or not this is the greatest thing to ever happen to guitar players or the shittiest pile of garbage to ever come out. And you guys just got to back off a little bit and relax on it, but that's not going to happen, so we'll see what happens. I've been going on about this for a little bit, so I'm going to wrap this up. I don't know, what do you guys think of the EVH 5150 Iconic? Let me know in the comments below. Try to keep it constructive, and we'll go from there.